Mrs. De Silva,
Here.
Mrs. Messick,
Here.
Mrs. Rigby,
Here.
Mr. Valentine,
Here.
and Mrs. Gillis.
Here. And we are going to move on to the Pledge of Allegiance with special guests from Wyandotte Elementary.
Not yet.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for allowing Wyandotte to lead the Pledge of Allegiance. We're also going to do the Wyandotte Pledge tonight for all of you. Team Wyandotte is our peer collaboration crew led by Mrs. Temple and Mrs. Dean, where we celebrate daily our abilities, our interest, our awesomeness, and our superpowers. We have over 60 students who are part of Team Wyandotte, and they support our kiddos in our community and all around Dublin. Team Wyandotte is committed to supporting Dublin's elite learning community by providing that we are always better together.
Okay, can our friends just take one step forward?
Take one step forward.
Can you bend down like that? And then can you do the same thing? Can you do this? Yeah, there you go. Can you do that? Okay. Yep, all right.
Thank you so much. Thank you, guys. Moms and dads, thank you for bringing them tonight.
Okay, approval of regular meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. De Silva. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Messick. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mrs. Messick,
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
Mr. Valentine,
Yes.
and Mrs. Gillis.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Approval of agenda is presented. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Rigby. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Valentine. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
Mr. Valentine,
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mrs. Messick,
Yes.
and Mrs. Gillis.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Moving on to awards and recognitions.
I would like to invite Kaufman Athletic Director, Mr. Dwayne Sheldon, to the podium.
Thank you. I would first like to start by thanking everyone in this room, especially the ones around these tables. We really appreciate everything you guys do, and I think this is great that you give a chance to recognize some of our top performers. In this case, obviously, we're talking about athletics, and this is someone we're very proud of, and I think everyone in the room is going to be proud of where he's heading and what his future is going to be as well. So I'm going to introduce our head wrestling coach at Dublin Kaufman, Chance Van Gundy, and let him present this special athlete.
All right. First of all, thank you to the board for allowing me to come up and talk about Ethan. We passionately known him. We call him Bird. So if I call him Bird, you'll understand. He's a two-time state champ, a four-time state placer, took 5th in the state as a freshman, 2nd in the state as a sophomore, losing to a nationally ranked opponent by 1 point, and then won the state title his junior and senior year. His junior year, he beat a defending state champ, so that was special. 4-time district champ. That's only been done several times in this Central District. OCC Wrestler of the Year, Central District Wrestler of the Year, and we've had a lot of success at Kaufman. Been fortunate enough to win the last 6 district and state dual regional titles. So we've won 6 straight, and Bird's been with us for the last 4. I would argue the last 2 years he's been the leader of that team. We kind of leaned on him, and his accolades speak for themselves. He also took 3rd in the nation at the Super 32 tournament in North Carolina, which is known as the toughest folk style tournament, which is what we do in high school is folk style. And then another style of wrestling is freestyle, which is Olympic style wrestling. He also took 3rd in the nation out in Fargo, North Dakota. So over the last 2 years, he's been ranked consistently in the top 5 in the nation, and he will be attending Ohio State next year, wrestling for the Buckeyes. And he did all of this holding down a 3.8 GPA and earning academic All-Ohio three different seasons. So without further ado, I just want to recognize our 2-time state champ, Ethan Burden.
Next, I would like to invite Executive Director of Human Resources, Mr. Brian Boney, to the podium.
Good evening, members of the board, audience. Typically, Ed Putnocki would be up here helping us with the Golden Shamrock. He is not able to be here tonight. So just a few words. Ed founded the Golden Shamrock Award in 1990 to recognize those staff members who've made outstanding contributions to our district and have had an impact on those around them. So we have 2 award winners tonight. And to start us out, I'd like to introduce the principal at Riverside Elementary, Miss Jacqueline Pallone, who will say a few words about Miss Rebecca Tate, our first award winner.
I always have to move the mic down after Mr. Boney. Good evening, everyone, and I'd like to thank the board for giving us this opportunity this evening and to recognize just an amazing educator that we have here in Dublin City Schools. Pablo Picasso said that the meaning of life is to find your gift, but the purpose of life is to give it away. Over the past 40 years as an educator, Becky Tate has done just that. She has given her gift of teaching to hundreds of students that she has taught to read, do math, share, and even tie their shoes. Becky comes into school early. She teaches summer school, and she even does instruction in the home. She is a proud parent of 3 Dublin graduates, and she is absolutely deserving of this awesome honor of being our Golden Shamrock this evening. Becky Tate.
I just want to say thank you. It is quite an honor, and it's, you can tell by my smile. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Tigers. Here, slide this way so we're sitting here. Becky, I'm actually going back next year to talk to the seniors and seniors. Yes, I do it every year.
And for our second award winner tonight, it's my honor to introduce Mr. Matt Sockleben, who will say a few words about Joe Santa Emma, our second award winner. Mr. Sockleben.
Good evening, everyone. President Gillis, members of the board, Dr. Marchhausen, thank you for giving us this opportunity to recognize a gentleman who deserves this Golden Shamrock, Mr. Joe Santa Emma. As he used to announce to the students when he'd make announcements, he'd say, "Children, this is Joe Santa Emma, assistant principal of Sells Middle School, and I have been the assistant principal now for 16.70 years, which is where he's currently at right now. But now he switched it up on us, and he is saying, when anybody he doesn't know, he introduces himself to everybody. He's saying, "Hi, I'm Joe Santa Emma, assistant principal of Sells Middle School for the next 31 days." As Joe is going to be retiring and sailing off into that proverbial sunset here at the end of the school year. So lots of great things that people have said about Joe, and one of the ones that I wanted to kind of highlight that talks about Joe is that Joe goes out of his way to get to know the students, their backgrounds, and their interests. In this way, Joe is incredibly effective at his job. Joe lives by his motto, work hard, be nice, and do the right thing. He preaches it to the students, but also models these words in his everyday life. He loves his family and would move mountains for them. Joe has played a major role in what is known as the Sells mystique, making Sells a very special place to work that those who have not experienced just don't understand. Joe will be missed with more than words can explain, as Sells will never be the same, but his legacy will forever be cherished. So I present to you Mr. Joe Santa Emma.
Good evening, everyone. I'm usually not lost for words. If you come in 6th, 7th, or 8th grade lunch, I can hold the attention span of those kids probably for 3 or 4 minutes before they want to get to their Takis and hot Cheetos. So I will keep this even shorter than that. Just really, I'm blessed beyond words to be able to stand here. Still remember the day that I was hired. We were in the boardroom of 1919, and I was on the steps, and I was just being introduced, and they said, "Do you have a few words?" And I said, "Just nice to be here, thank you." So I got off to a great start, but time has flown by, and God, I love Sells Middle School, and I love the kids, and I think everybody in that back row will attest to that. I just got 3 thank yous. First, to Matt Sockleben. He's a great leader, a tremendous advocate for kids on a daily basis, and he's a pleasure to work with and for. So thank you, Matt. The next thank you goes to everybody back there except for one person, or 2 people. One doesn't go to middle school yet because he's at Scottish Corners, and he's just a student to cheer me on tonight. The other one is my wife, but I will get to her next. Those ladies and gentlemen, Ryan, no, there you are great people. They're family to me. I would do anything for them at any time of the day or night to help their family or help their job at Sells. You guys are tremendous. Going to miss you. I will be back. Murphy, my grand dog, will be with me, and I know you can't wait to see that. In 1987, I met a person that changed my life. She got me through graduate school, undergraduate school. I screwed that up. Great. Undergraduate first, Joe, and then graduate school. She gave me 4 beautiful kids that we love more than life itself. She supported me through 34.72 or 4 years of the toughest job that any human can, is working with kids on a daily basis. She has helped me the last 10 years dive into a passion of mine that will now lead to other doors as I walk out of Sells Middle School. And I'm truly blessed beyond words to have her as my wife. I love you. That's it. I'm out. Peace.
Okay, now we will do our tolls report. Mr. Scott Melody is joining us tonight.
Good evening, members of the board. Thank you for allowing me to be here this evening for a brief update on tolls. First of all is the annual tolls board dinner that I did forward an invitation to everyone again this evening. Hopefully you are available to make it to tolls on April 24th. Once again, it's a great evening. Open house for the first hour to get meet some of the students and their programs, and then a dinner hosted by the culinary program. Next, I wanted to announce, I believe I might have mentioned this last meeting as well, but we received a Career Tech grant of $533,000 for tolls, and we're going to use that in the construction program, specifically for funding for electrical and HVAC equipment to expand the programs for Career Tech. Next, we did vote and approve as the Board of Education last month for an expansion of approximately $30 million on the tolls facility. This is specifically for a high bay lab as well as new programming for the early childhood programs in healthcare. That will be a groundbreaking. We're developing those plans over the next 6 months. We'll be doing a groundbreaking in the fall or early next year with opening as soon as possible. There is some information on there about the Career Tech fact sheet in the board update. And then finally to announce, right now our current enrollment for next year is sitting at 699 students. That is level 1 students in senior only programs. So there are still some additional space for senior only programs as well. And before you ask, I do not have the breakdown right now of Dublin students in the programs. So I will get that for you and forward that to you before the next board meeting. I believe that was a brief update on everything that I wanted to share with you this evening. Are there any questions?
I have a couple of questions, but if you don't have the answers to them right now, you can I'll email you later. But,
okay.
I noticed on your report that it says that due to lab space limitations, some of the programs have higher numbers of waitlisted students. Can you tell us, like, how do they get off the wait list, or are they likely to get off the wait list? And then the second part of my question is, will any of the expansion help with those programs, like the animal management, cosmetology, welding, or is it just the ones that you just mentioned?
Okay. Yes, the answer to the first question about the wait list. Right now, if they're on the wait list, the only way to get off the wait list is if between now and really, I'll say the first like 2 weeks of school, if a student withdraws from the program. Once we get past that first week or two, it's hard to really backfill someone into that program. So if someone drops out over the summer or moves out of the district or changes their mind, then the next person on the wait list would be eligible to attend. And then, yes, the expansion, specifically, it will 100% address some additional needs in the welding program. But the welding rooms then will also free up, and we're going to reorganize some of the classrooms throughout the building to be able to offer additional programming. And it just depends on what the program is, how easy it is to backfill, like cosmetology, for example. There is a wait list on that, but that's a very expensive space, dedicated space for cosmetology. And we just spent about $1 million last year renovating the 2 classrooms and doubling the capacity for cosmetology. So that would be one that we would probably have maybe a little bit lower on the list and focus on some of the other programs first. But we are consistently looking at the enrollment and the needs of the students and what they want to be able to meet those needs of the community. So,
Thank you.
all right. Any other questions? All right.
Thanks, and we'll see you on the 24th.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
See you at the BAC meeting next week, too. So, thank you.
Yes.
We have no one signed up for public participation. So moving on to Board of Education committees.
Sorry, I have a few things. Kind of a lot, so I'll try to hurry through some of this. So on April 9th, the PTO Leadership Council met, and Mrs. Dietrich gave a brief update on the upcoming dodgeball tournament, and Dr. Marshausen shared updates on Infinite Campus, the responsible staffing plan, and the Cardinal Health Building. And there were lots of questions and lots of discussion around Infinite Campus and Schoology and how to support students' executive functioning skills while also not contributing to their anxiety. I thought that was an interesting conversation. Also discussed cell phone usage at school and some of the changes that have been seen specifically at the middle school level. On April 4th, the academic subcommittee met, and we covered a lot during that meeting. Thank you to Mrs. Marple and her team. So I'm just going to share some highlights. The board will have 2 readings of the graded course of study starting on April 25th. World language and mathematics are currently in review. For world languages, there's an addition of intercultural competency, which I think is wonderful. In regards to mathematics, we talked about strengthening the high school math pathways. Students will have the opportunity to take data science foundations, which is an Algebra 2 equivalent, which is a new course for us. The AP Pre-Calculus is replacing honors pre-calculus, so students may have the opportunity to earn college credit. We're currently waiting on math legislation to make sure that the adoption of resources are aligned with the science of reading, although not totally clear, at least myself, I'm not totally clear on the science of math, but science of math, not science of reading. But anyhow, the academics team is also working to establish a formal written curriculum for the district's academy programs, early literacy updates. Senate Bill 33 requires that all pre-K through 5 teachers use approved high-quality instructional materials for ELA instruction during the 24-25 school year, and the district is currently looking at resources that support language comprehension to ensure that the district is in compliance with state law. An adjustment of tiered support services is underway to ensure that services are continued earlier in the school year, so there isn't a big gap or delay in services. We also discussed a review of the health curriculum next year. And I'll pause in case Chris wants to add anything.
You've hit on the points.
Okay. And then the Parent Equity Committee met last night. Members of the district equity team were also in attendance at the meeting, and administrators from each high school shared the student perspective on what makes them feel a sense of belonging. And I thought that was interesting just to hear some of their ideas about what makes them feel a sense of belonging in the schools. And a lot of students said teacher relationships were big, school activities of all different types of clubs, and classes where discussion takes place, which I thought that was interesting too, and I kind of like that one. Michael Blake and Tyler Wolf shared a great presentation on the district's equity and belonging ideas and initiatives, and I think the attendees really appreciated the presentation overall, and some suggested that perhaps those presentations could be shared at a board meeting or on the website so the public knows what some of those initiatives and ideas are. They also gave great feedback. They really value discussion time. They wanted more opportunities to share feedback, discuss various topics, collaborate more with the district to meet student needs. They also mentioned that some of the engagement group meetings have fallen on major holidays, including last night's meeting falling during Eid, which they did not view as inclusive. But with this being my first official meeting as a board representative for the equity group, I found it beneficial to hear their feedback and what their experiences was like over the past couple of years. And I think all of this represents an opportunity for the district to demonstrate the values of better together and always growing, because even their feedback kind of lends itself to that. And then lastly, as the OSBA delegate, it's that time of year again where the OSBA platform is up for additions. So in order for, I guess I'll explain it because you haven't heard my spiel yet. So every year, member boards have the opportunity to submit suggested changes to the platform for review. So if the board would like to see an issue considered for this year's platform, we have to create a resolution and send it to OSBA, the Director of Legislative Services, by May 31st. And you can read the OSBA legislative platform at ohioschoolboards.org/legislative-platform. Personally, I would like to see the platform's equity plank in alignment with the district's policy, but any official suggestions would need to be in the form of a board resolution. And that's it.
So I've got a couple from the meetings that I went to. So the elementary school stack meeting, middle school and high school stack meeting, where I was able to listen to some teachers and what their thoughts were on how things are going. And the first discussion topic was the new learning environment of Infinite Campus, and still this struggle between moving over from Schoology to Infinite Campus, and it seems to be more student-based issues than teacher-based issues, in that students are not able to see their grades immediately and have to wait for the teachers to push them over. So it's just going to take some time to get used to, but it's getting better. Also talking about the responsible staffing plan with the staff, what average class sizes will be, how they're going to change, and right sizing and what that means. And also Dr. Marshausen explaining that that does not mean we're on a hiring freeze, but rather we're just really cognizant of when we do backfill a position, why we backfill it and if it needs to be backfilled. And then there was also discussion over the Cardinal Health Building and how the teachers will be involved in helping determine what will be done with that building, and reiterating that no decisions have been made and that it will, they'll be involved as well as several other engagement groups with the community and staff to do that. So that was from the STAC meetings. Mrs. Gillis, do you have anything to add?
No.
Okay. And then I had the opportunity to meet with DEF on Tuesday night, where we had 14 grant proposals from students, from teachers mainly, and a couple groups of students for grants, and which they are funding for our teachers that go above and beyond the normal curriculum in the classroom. So this is to get supplies and other necessities to be able to put on these different activities that they want to do, and they had $12,500 in order, $12,500 to give out in grants. We had 14 presentations, and they were able to fully or partially fund many of the grant proposals, and it was a wonderful night seeing what our teachers are doing here in Dublin to really make student learning fun, and the different initiatives that they have out there. So I was very happy to get to be a part of that and give away money. So I'm looking forward to seeing those grants put into place and the outcomes.
Mr. Valentine, Mrs. Rigby, any comments? Okay. I had key communicators last night. Our first meeting with kind of our new structure, and so really great conversation on communication, how we get our information, and just how we're going to build upon that to get information out to more people in the district. I think we could have been in there for probably till past 10 o'clock at night. I mean, it was really great engagement, so that was wonderful to be a part of. If no one has anything else, we will move to our student representative update.
All right. Really quick, I wanted to say that originally when I talked to students about the Infinite Campus sort of switch over, there was a lot of pushback, and they were obviously concerned that they weren't seeing their grades, but as time has gone on, I've seen a lot less and less students kind of being so worried about it, and they are getting used to a new normal, so that is good to see. Now for the rest of everything. Okay, so this Monday, students were extremely thankful that we were able to get off to see the eclipse. Coming up, we have district dodgeball on May 10th with student, teacher, and community organization teams. The beneficiary will be the Glitter Girls Guild. The Glitter Girls Guild is active in the city of Dublin and in the school community. It is a nonprofit that works with families that have been impacted by a medical diagnosis, glittering Dublin by dropping off dinners, treats, doing laundry, and landscaping for families. Yesterday, our team was able to visit Eversole Run Middle School Student Council to converse with students about topics within their school. We discussed school life balance, possible new curriculum, and R Factor. Across the district, Hope Week kicked off. Every day there was a theme relating to a positive mental health idea. A fundraiser was held for students to donate money to pay a selected teacher and student to be pied in the face. The venue, so it's pretty cool. I'm excited. The Dublin Harmony Music Festival is tomorrow, sponsored by the Dublin ACT Youth Council, promoting living a substance-free life. This will be at the Kaufman Park Pavilion, and there will be a cakewalk, foods, Kona ice, and other things encouraging substance-free lifestyles. Students are now excited for the upcoming end-of-year school field trips across the district, with some notable field trips going to Kings Island, the zoo, and the OSU Medical Laboratories. News from Kaufman. Kaufman's prom is next Saturday, April 20th, with the theme, At Last, I See the Light from Tangled. We will have 360 video booth, prepaid Grader's ice cream truck, and a lot of fun. From Jerome, seniors are getting ready to participate in the final senior year activities. We will be going to Kings Island, and the senior superlatives have kicked off, so those are always fun to see how that's going to turn out. They have also been celebrating Hope Week. They included a family night and multiple kindness activities throughout the week. Jerome's orchestra went to Chicago for a competition. Jerome's HOSA qualified for an international competition over the summer. And Jerome was ranked second in the top 30 public high schools in Ohio. Students from students from Davis came to Scioto and competed in a slam poetry competition for juniors. Scioto hosted a job fair hosting students from high schools in Dublin. Scioto is also having its Celebration of Excellence coming up, celebrating students recognized as being leaders across the school community. One thing I wanted to highlight from Scioto, and it'll also push into Emerald because they've done a similar event. Scioto's held a prom pop-up shop, so they were able to make sure that students who might not have an outfit were able to get very affordable clothing to go do that. Emerald also held a similar event, but for the purpose of finding business-appropriate, affordable clothing as they continue into the workforce. Today at Emerald, if you didn't notice, it was the celebration of learning. Today, teachers opened their doors to parents and kids around Dublin to come explore all of the opportunities that Emerald offers. Student helpers talked to parents and presented their achievements and talents while providing information about the Emerald campus courses. IB art students also showcased their artwork throughout the school. We also held a Future You Career Week, which happened to be a success, and unfortunately, our IB testing starts in about a week and a half, so I'm not excited for that. But that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions before we move on to reports and action items from Superintendent? Nope. Dr. Marshausen, you're up.
Okay, first of all, there is a first reading on tonight's calendar for revisions to several of our existing and previously approved board calendars, and this revision includes the change from half-day to all-day kindergarten. So beginning with the 25-26 and including the 26-27 calendars, that will change the start date for kindergarten and remove that half-day provision from those calendars. Also, as our practice has been, we have the 27-28 calendar on here, thanks to Mrs. O'Connor and DEA and DSA and Dr. Schwanke for leading the calendar process, as the calendar process is outlined in our negotiated agreement, as well as how we handle it through our board policy. So tonight will serve as a first reading. Those will be on for board approval at the next board meeting. The board in November adopted a 5-year forecast that had, had consistency in numbers for our staff that would allow us to stretch the 2023 levy request longer and hopefully at least 4 years. That board leadership with the 5-year forecast led to us, in collaborations with our partners at DEA, and the work that we did together with implementing the responsible staffing plan. As one of you mentioned from your reports, we're not on a hiring freeze. In fact, we have a lot of jobs posted right now, and we anticipate having 35 to 40 new teachers next year as we start the school year. But we also anticipate that overall, we'll have 20 to 25 less positions than we have as we started this school year. As we look at what the work is that we're doing, we also are looking at what had been a common practice in Dublin, which is if someone retired, we just automatically posted their job and replaced them. And as we came out of COVID and came out of having a virtual academy, and as populations have shifted, this is allowing us to right-size our staff. It's allowing us to get the right people in the right spots. Typically, we would have a handful of involuntary transfers in any given school year. We had 35 this year. where there were 35 teachers who moved buildings, moved grade levels, were shifted to put our resources in the right place. We are grateful to our teachers and understand that there's a ripple effect, not just for the person who was moved, but for their friends and those who they work with. And as we go through this process, this has been very emotional, and we know that it's taken a toll, and we're grateful for the work that our teachers have done as we go through this. The ultimate goal is increased efficiency. And I think when you look at what happened in the March levies across the state of Ohio, you are starting to see that backlash to higher taxes. You're starting to see people say, how are you going to deal with growth without always coming back to me? And we continue to acknowledge, before we would ever come back to our voters again, we want to be able to say, here are all the things that we have done to tighten our belts, to become more efficient, and to use your tax dollars in the best possible way. Part of that is exploring other ways to manage enrollment, and we'll talk in a minute about the Cardinal Health building and Class A office space and all of the options that affords to us as a district that save 200, 300, 400% over what new construction costs would be. When we look at that responsible staffing plan, here are the numbers at middle school that we've shared. In 23-24, this school year, our average middle school course in our core subjects was 21.28 students. Next year, we're anticipating the average class size in our core subjects at the middle school level as being 23.5 students. For a teacher, that's 10 more students a day. 10 more sets of papers, 10 more comments, 10 more parents at conferences, all of those things. But as we look at numbers, when you look at total numbers of sections, this allows us to reduce the number of folks that we need in those teaching positions by increasing those course numbers just a little bit. And as we work to schedule more efficiently, these are things that we're able to do to reduce the overall number of staff members that we need to educate the same number of students. As we continue to grow and we say at our middle schools, we can absorb more students without hiring more staff. It means that average class size will start to creep up a little bit. And when we look at those averages, we'll have to have conversations. What is the top of what we have that's acceptable for us in Dublin? I don't think it's 23.5. While we're still in the midst of the high school scheduling process due to the complexities of high school schedules and working with Emerald, we anticipate to see similar increases in numbers. We anticipate a couple more kids in each class as we increase efficiency and increase class sizes, so that as we continue to grow, it's not always just hiring another body. In our elementary, we're committed to that 24 in kindergarten and first grade, 26 in first and second grade, second and third grade, and 28 in fourth and fifth grade. When you look at our averages here, our averages are still below those numbers. But you will also notice that we have several buildings that as we look at next year and we've done the monkey move up and we've moved the students to the next grade level, we do have certain classes where we're at those caps at our top right now. And we'll have to make some decisions in June and July. If you're at a building where the class is at 28 and you're not going to go over 28, if you have 2 kids move in, you might ship them to Glacier. If you have 6 kids move in, you might say, we're going to have another section. And when you get to having another section, it drops that 28 to 22 as you divide by 5 instead of by 4. So those are the kind of decisions that have significant impact on the budget if done in grand scale, and conversations that Dr. Schwanke, along with our elementary principals and Mrs. Althouse, will make as we look at these numbers overall. We shared these with our teachers to let them know, as we look at responsible staffing, we're not talking about 30 kids in every freshman course, as we talk to our elementary teachers and reassure our parents who said, hey, if the levy passed, you said the class sizes wouldn't be larger. The class sizes are still right where we've always wanted them to be, which was 24, 26, 28. As we talk about the potential of the Cardinal Health Building, and you talk about spending 35 or 37 million versus 200 million to get 250,000 square feet, we've engaged our partners at Planning Next. Planning Next has a long history in Dublin. They've helped the city of Dublin with their master plan. They've worked with us on our Journey 2030. I just got the proposal at the beginning of this meeting from our friends at Planning Next. What we're looking about in the spring is focus groups throughout the community. We're looking at 20 or more focus groups to be held to have conversations about, do we want 3 big high schools or do we want 4 high schools? If it's 4 high schools, where would you like to see the 4th high school be? What could a Class A office space that you could get for pennies on the dollar, what could that office space be used for that saves our taxpayers dollars and creates an educational learning space that is innovative and creative and allows us to take advantage of the resources that are in this community? So those focus groups will take place this spring. When we come back in September, we will have a community survey that everyone will have the opportunity to participate in, and we will also tack some questions on our annual Paul Fallon survey so that we will have both voluntary survey data and scientific survey data to compare and look at those results. And before Thanksgiving, to have a report to the board on here's the community sentiments, feelings, reactions to all of the different options to dealing with high school growth. Really, the only unacceptable option is to do nothing. Because as we look at the 60,000 a square foot addition that opened at Jerome this year, Jerome will top 2,500 students next year. And now we start looking at Jerome creeping up. All of those 275 elementary kids that we get every year are growing up. We're looking at where are those kids going to go as they get to that high school level. All of the work that we're doing now should be a little bit easier next school year. When we look at the responsible staffing plan, we won't have 35 involuntary transfers next year. As we look at responsible staffing, we know that we're going to open an elementary school, but we also know that 2 or 3 teachers from every grade level are going to slide right from DEP into the new elementary school, because next year DEP's going to have 1,000 students in 6 or 7 sections of every grade level. The work that we've done with the science of reading, and as we look at implementing Core 95 as our word study program, and now we start looking at our comprehension programs, all of that work gets a little bit easier as we become more familiar and it becomes part of our daily operations. As we've already heard from Keegan, Infinite Campus gets a little bit easier. Next year, it'll be even easier. Next year, as parents fill out the enrollment information in Infinite Campus, as we do student scheduling, as students get used to that every day, it gets a little bit easier. Jen and I already have gotten dozens of questions about redistricting. We just need to be clear, nobody's redistricting for the fall of '24, but what we're talking about is the fall of '25, when we open a new elementary school, when we redistribute some of our middle school kids, because 1,000 kids at DEP can't become 3,000 students at Eversole at any point. So as we look at what does this look like as we move forward, we're going to have to do some redistricting of our middle schools. For those people who have questions about the redistricting, there is already a tab at the top of our website that says redistricting. It has a brief summary about what we're doing. And every time we get a new question, we add that to the frequently asked questions. So the people who want meetings and they want to know about what's going to happen, go there first. And if you have questions that aren't answered there, if you send them to Cassie or to me or to info@dublinschools.net, We'll get the answers to those frequently asked questions there so everybody knows what's taking place. Upcoming focus items for us as a district. And I think those of you who were at the teacher meeting got a little bit of a taste of this. We're going to have a conversation about student behavior and school discipline. My friend and mentor, Tim Kite, often points out that the word discipline in Latin means to learn, and it's a student. The disciples were students. Discipline and punishment are very different, and we have to discipline students. Our primary first core value is take responsibility. We have to hold students accountable for their behavior. We have to know that your behavior has consequences, and sometimes those consequences are bad. That's how you learn. I think we've lost some of this a little bit. I also think as we talk about student belonging and we look at 10 years of panorama data, have we moved the needle at all? And if we haven't moved the needle at all, why do we continue to do the same thing year after year after year? So we're going to form a committee that will start this summer, and we're going to take the next year to look at student behavior and discipline and what are we doing to prepare our students for success. Because if we say as a school district, our vision is to prepare students for success, some of that is to graduate students who are self-regulated, who are disciplined, who understand that there are consequences when things go good and when they go bad. So we're going to work on that. Secondly, my interest has been piqued by the student reaction to Infinite Campus and Schoology. I'm concerned about the over-reliance and over-importance we have on grades. A friend of mine is the superintendent in Palo Alto, California, which coincidentally is one of the 5 benchmark districts that we benchmark ourselves against as a district. And they're taking a 3 to 5 year period to look at how do we manage grades, lower stress, and we're not saying we want to be grade less. Students should get grades. When you go to college, you're going to get grades. Tests and quizzes have consequences. But it shouldn't be, as we've heard, kids who check their grades in Schoology every hour during the school day. We're doing something wrong if you're checking your grades every hour during the school day. So again, something we need to look at. And then finally, and Mrs. De Silva touched on this, the district equity work. We haven't gotten this right, but I think we continue to get closer with every step that we take. In my mind, this isn't about politics. It isn't about external issues. This is about celebrating the diversity that we have in the Dublin City Schools. I love the model the city has put forth for us. What the city of Dublin does to celebrate and recognize everyone that we have who's part of the city of Dublin is wonderful. When we talk about calendars and attendance, our average daily attendance in the Dublin City Schools is 95%. We average about 5% of our students being absent on any given day. On Good Friday, we were at 92%. On Good Friday, we had 8% of our students out, so 3% greater than normal. Yesterday for Eid, we were at 87%. We had 13% of our students out yesterday, or 8% more than normal. About 1,100 students took off for religious reasons yesterday for Eid. This is awesome. We allow our kids and our families to celebrate our kids and our families. We allow our students to not have the stress of tests or major assignments on those days. And we also, if you think about yesterday, our low socioeconomic families who aren't Muslim didn't have to get childcare for their kids because we do what we do. On Good Friday, the families who chose not to stay home for religious reasons, they went to work, their kids came to school, and we're saying to everyone in Dublin, you celebrate with your family and your heritage and your tradition, And we don't want to be an impediment to that. But we're also going to keep the doors open for those kids who want to come to school on those days. So I'm grateful for how we're doing what we're doing. And when we look at our calendars moving forward, I think our numbers bear out that the decisions that we've made to allow people to make decisions for their families is the right decision for a increasingly diverse community. When we look at our District Equity Council, we have that group of administrators, professionals, experts who form that council. We have building equity teams, we have student equity teams, and we have our parent equity committee. The vision going forward would be that that District Equity Council would be the core, and that quarterly they would meet with parents to share what we're doing in the district, to get the parents' response to the work that we're doing, and to gather feedback from the parents. That council is hearing what's happening in our buildings. And as I said yesterday, Journey 2030 specifically wants and directs our focus to be on the student experience. And I've had parents in some of these meetings share stories of things that have happened to their child or their family that would violate those principles. And I would encourage any parent that we have, if something happens with your child, we have a process for if your child experiences something that's bad for your kid, call the building principal, call the teacher. We have a process for those individual experiences that may create stress, or a child may be bullied, or something happens to that kid. We know how to do that. So I think as we look at this work going forward, I hope we can follow the model that the city has set forth for us as being a way to celebrate and a way to recognize and learn from each other. And I think, as Mrs. De Silva heard last night, those student-led celebrations and experiences are what our kids say allows them an opportunity to share their culture with their peers. Upcoming events next Wednesday, Community Champions at Jerome. I know that Cassie and Keyburn were there. This is a shift for us, and I know you've probably been invited, some of you as board members. I know you've helped me in the past put medals around some of our students' necks. We've had trouble finding Saturdays in the spring because it's crazy town. When you look at trying to get elementary kids who are involved in club sports and travel sports. So we're trying a Wednesday evening this year, I'm sorry. So that's next Wednesday at Jerome. As Mr. Melody mentioned, the following Wednesday is the Tolles board member and administrative opportunity to go tour Tolles, have a great meal provided by the culinary arts students there. The Thursday after that, on the 25th, is the groundbreaking and board meeting. That will all take place at Jerome. And we will also hear from the 5 student groups with the different names for elementary 15. And then just thinking a little bit ahead, Community Service Day, awesome day. I know a lot of our kids participate. We'll have teacher teams that participate. When organized by the Chamber of Commerce in the city of Dublin, we've got, every year I've said, I've gotten to the same house now 3 years in a row and helped an elderly couple with their mulch, with their landscaping, cleaning out gutters. And if anyone knows a family or individual in our community who just needs a hand with that spring cleaning, if you contact the Chamber of Commerce, you can get on the list. Jenny does a phenomenal job there, and teams from all over the city, the churches come together. They give you your assignments, you go and you weed, you spread mulch, you do all of that kind of outdoor stuff that allows some of our seniors to be ready for the summer and keep up with things when maybe they can't move around quite as much. I'm going to take any questions from the 5 of you before I turn it over to Cassie.
All right, good evening. I'm just going to talk a little bit about how we're working to extend our reach and looking at different platforms. At the last meeting, I talked about targeting and segmentation, and so now we're starting to figure out what channels we need to use to try to reach some of these groups that we're not sure we are currently reaching. So we are focusing right now on LinkedIn and Nextdoor. I'm going to talk a lot about Nextdoor tonight, and then I'm going to share what's trending on social media because I know everyone loves that part. So we have started a Nextdoor public agency page, and that is different from a regular Nextdoor account or a business account. When you are designated a public agency, they actually use geographical data, so GIS maps that Mr. Gill sent me so that I could get to Nextdoor. And they automatically subscribe anybody who lives in your geographical boundaries to your channel. So where like Facebook or Instagram, we have to encourage people to follow us to get this information. As a public agency, we automatically show up in the feed of those people who live within Dublin City School District's boundaries. And so we have currently already 39,528 people following our Nextdoor account. We've only posted a couple times. We're still trying to figure out exactly what we want to post and how we want to use it, but we did get it set up. To our knowledge, after checking with several of our peers and Nextdoor, we are the first school district in Ohio to use Nextdoor in this way as a public agency. Nextdoor is very popular on the West Coast, and it is moving east. So it's like California, everybody has it, and it's getting more and more popular and growing in the Midwest now. So the nice thing is as a public agency, it's a free service for us, but they provide a support team. There's controls on Nextdoor as a public agency page that we do not have on Facebook and Instagram. So we can shut conversations down if things are getting out of control. We can report trolls to Nextdoor, and they can basically say, you need to be or do better. And so there's a lot of things that are actually positive in Nextdoor that we don't necessarily get with our other social media channels. And then what it does is it actually allows us to target these members and households by school. You can see here on the map. So we have all of our geographical boundaries in there, and we will update them when we redistrict, and by neighborhood. And so now what we're able to do is we can post, and something that only applies to 25% of our district, we can share it with only that 25% of our district. And what it does is it eliminates the noise for the people whom that message doesn't apply to. And so we're specifically targeting those people that it applies to. So for example, if you think about the Jerome Homecoming Parade and what roads it might shut down, as a courtesy to the neighborhoods that are in Jerome, we can put a post on there letting them know that the roads for the parade or the parade route will be X, Y, and Z, and that would only go to the people that are impacted by that parade route or those road closures. Similar with transportation. So let's say we have bus issues and buses are delayed because lines are down or there's an accident. We could get on Nextdoor and let families know that in that area, wherever that might be, that buses are delayed. And so this is a new and unique way for us to communicate with our community, and we're really, really excited about it. Keyburn and I are taking some PD and webinars and things. To, actually, I just reached out yesterday to some acquaintances on the West Coast to see how the other school districts are using it and what the ROI is for them. So we are very excited. And then outside of Nextdoor, obviously we are still using Facebook and Instagram just to communicate and share the great things that are happening in our district. So for the month of March into April, so I did March 1st to April 11th, our top 3 posts on Facebook were our celebrating National Paraprofessional Appreciation Day. Our social media managers in our building deserve a shout out because Keyburn and I dropped the ball a little bit. We kind of forgot that it was Parapro Appreciation Day. And so Keyburn sent out a message to our social media managers who work in every building and said, hey, could you please get me some pictures of your parapros because we want to celebrate them on Facebook. And she had a ton of pictures in a matter of minutes and hours. So she was very excited. And we really appreciate them kind of bringing it home for us on that. And then we have the board meeting in March where we had the ROCKS students and then also our Golden Shamrock, including Mrs. Vicki Lighting from HR. And then the third top 3 post was our English Learner program. So we have, and I'm probably going to mess this up because I don't know all the details, but we have a team that helps host high school students, I believe, to help them, is it transition from middle school to high school, I think, or transition to schools? Yes? Maybe? Yeah? Okay. He's like, I don't know. But Teresa Troyer, who works in the EL department, shared these pictures with me. And again, aside from the board meeting post, I can't express enough how helpful it is when people in the district share things with us. There's only 3 of us, and we have a lot on our plates, and it's hard to keep track of everything that's going on in the buildings. And I am so thankful that people are starting to learn that when they send stuff to us, it's super popular, it gets high engagement, and it gets their departments represented in the great work that they're doing. Then on Instagram, not surprising with our student group there, that the #1 post was the little boy dancing, realizing that spring break started the next day. People, very excited about spring break. And then interestingly enough, I found this kind of awesome. The post about the first 3 Dublin graduates being women for Women's History Month was a top post on Instagram. And then the third was our bus drivers in the St. Patrick's Day Parade. So it's fun just to see what happens and all the exciting things out there. So does anybody have any questions?
No questions, but thanks for starting Nextdoor, and I will. I'm looking forward to sharing that with my mom. Maybe she'll stop sending me screenshots. But that is very exciting. I think we needed to be there. Any more comments, questions? Nope. Okay. Reports and action items from the treasurer's office.
I'll be real quick this evening. We do have some donations, actually just two separate donations from the Davis PTO to Davis Middle School for some athletic uniforms and equipment replacements, and also T-shirts that say Davis Middle School for our incoming 6th graders. We're always appreciative of what our PTOs do for all our buildings across the district. Appropriation changes, you'll see here, there is a grant from Honda that we're appropriating to be able to use, but also along with the passage of the November 2023 bond issue, the money to be used to be appropriated. As you know, the big projects of that $95 million that was issued will be Elementary 15, Preschool Edition, and then many projects throughout the district, capital projects throughout the district. That, Jeff, how many exactly do we have? 40 projects that we have over the district. So we're appreciative of our voter support and be able to do these much needed new buildings addition and maintain our buildings. And then we finally have our financial report for March. As you can see, we're within projections at this point in the year. Dr. Marshausen mentioned the November 5-year forecast. We'll be doing an update here in May. And so we look forward to that and getting with you. We are finally getting our final settlements for our counties here. We have 3 counties for real estate taxes here in April. And so when you see the April financial report, you see how we came in for the fiscal year. So we'll go from there. But any questions on anything?
All right, thank you, Mr. Kern. If no questions, it is recommended by the treasurer that the Board of Education approve items 7B through 7D. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Messick. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. De Silva. Questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Messick?
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby?
Yes.
Mr. Valentine?
Yes.
And Mrs. Gillis?
Yes. Motion passes 5-0. Reports from Department of Academics and Student Learning.
Okay, I'm actually going to flip it at this point. I will end because I have 2 action items. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Mrs. Marple, to go first.
Thank you, Dr. Schwanke. Good evening, Board. Tonight, I would like to talk a little bit about our Tier 2 and 3 literacy and math support in our K-5 spaces. We've talked a little bit about our model as we've talked about some of our literacy goals in Dublin City Schools. But as we continue to work to provide an elite learning community for our students and families, it's my pleasure to share with you that we're making some small adjustments moving into the fall to how we serve our students in those spaces at elementary. For many, many years in Dublin City Schools, we have paused literacy and math support each fall to let students adjust to a new school year and gather new assessment information about our students. As we have reflected on this model, we've heard a desire from our families and also from our teachers to offer more continuous service for our returning students so that there isn't quite as long of a pause in the fall to providing literacy and math support to some of our youngest learners. So under the leadership of our coordinator of MTSS, Brittany Deschler, she's worked closely with our elementary principals and our support teachers to establish a process to review data this spring in May. By reviewing student data at the end of the year, we're going to be able to identify students that could benefit from more immediate literacy and or math support this fall. So the purpose of this change in our model is to serve students who need continued intervention work from one school to the next and eliminate delays in service. We also want to not stop service just because it's the end of the school year, really thinking about that as it's kind of an artificial end, right? And then, you know, everything shuts down and then everything starts back up. So our goal is to reduce the number of days that there's that shutdown for these students and get them jump-started at the beginning of the school year. We also want to ensure that our students are ready to be independent learners prior to exiting that service. So in some cases, this might be used as a transition time for students who may have needed support, but we're starting to see that they're able to be more independent. But we might scaffold them a little bit at the beginning of the year as they start up with a new classroom and then release them out of that service if they are ready. And we also continue to stand on our value of serving the right students at the right time with the right intervention. So this change does support those goals. So once our building teams gather that data, they will review and analyze the data of these students that they know very well because they've had them this school year in their classrooms. And they'll use that information to decide, okay, who is ready to exit and who needs continued service. The teams will then have time to get a service plan ready to go early in the new school year, and whenever possible, we will work to have that student stay with the same interventionist so they get that continuity of service. Fall data will continue to be used when students come back to progress monitor how they're doing as readers, writers, and mathematicians, and to identify new students for this added support. So there will still be an additional scoop of students for service in the fall, but we won't go back to square one because we'll have been working with our students on a more continuous basis. It is our hope that this small shift in service will make a big difference for our students as we consider our early literacy and numeracy goals within the school district. And I'd be happy to answer any questions now or later if you have them.
I just have just one question about the kind of your mindset change, and in terms of timing. What was it before, and what are you looking at now with the change?
Great question. So I would say that in May, when we did spring data collection, it was used to reflect upon the year versus thinking about the next year, because we always kind of in our mind knew that when students came back, there would be this thing that educators often call summer slide, right, where students might have lost some learning over the summer, which typically they retain fairly quickly, right? They come right back, they get back in a routine. And so then there would be this pause because our assessment window in the fall is a big assessment time. There's lots of mandated assessments that are a part of that time. And so it's all hands on deck for the assessment, and that data comes in typically by the end of September, but then it takes quite a bit of time to process that data. So you really have, anywhere from 4 to 7 weeks at the beginning of the year of lost time with that level of intervention for these students, that intervention is critical. That's really a whole intervention cycle for some students. I can tell you
Yeah,
want to
and
add
that was
something.
always hard to explain to parents and teachers too. We know this child is a struggling reader, but we'll start serving them in a small group at the end of September.
Right.
When we knew that, right? And so Lori's exactly right. The spring data we looked at, we studied it, we thought, okay, well, here's how we can get better next year. But there was just a lag that was a lot longer than we wanted it to be. Now, there is a little bit of worry that the level that a child is, say, reading in May might drastically change by August 15th, depending on what they do over the summer. So we'll still assess, but we're not going to stop serving. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. A small but not insignificant amount of our district revenue comes from federal programs. And so tonight I wanted to talk just briefly about one program or grant, which is Title III, which is Language Instruction for Limited English Proficient and Immigrant Students. And there are two parts to Title III. One is for language instruction, and the other is for immigrant students. Now, we used to get immigrant funding here, which would make sense because we're the 4th largest immigrant district in Ohio. We're right behind Columbus, Cincinnati, and Dayton. But the criteria in order to get this funding for the immigrant side is you have to have more than 30 students, which we definitely do, but you have to have seen an increase of 5% as an average over the last 2 years. And we had a dip from 2020 where we had 868 immigrant students. And ODE uses, the Department of Education and Workforce uses an October 1 count. So we had 868 in 2020. We dipped to 759 in 2021. We went up to 796 last year. And in October of this year, we had 984. So we clearly have eclipsed that 5% mark. As of this moment, though, this is the one that I was blown away by when I learned this today. We have 1,152. So we've gone just this year from October 984 to 1152 today. So now on to the Title III money that we actually do get, and that's language instruction for English learners. We have exactly 2,069 English learners as of this moment, and this year we received about $285,000, or an average of $138 per student. Again, it's not a lot, but we're thankful for every dollar that we do get. Title III funds have to be spent for two things. The first one is to increase language proficiency for students, and the other one is provide high-quality professional development to staff. So we use these funds to pay for some of our bilingual aides in the district, and we also use them for professional development. And so tonight, on the HR portion of the agenda, you'll see some of this required professional development. Our EL lead teachers are going to be offering our annual EL Summer Institute. And so different staff members can choose a different track that meets their needs so they can help meet the needs of our English learners. So when you see the EL Summer Institute on the agenda a little bit later, you'll know that that is funded for through Title III. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andres. Okay, for my portion of the agenda this evening, I'd like to first talk about what's on the agenda regarding Chromebooks. And I want to take a moment to thank Kelly Ram, who spent about 3 or 4 months really researching the needs of our district in terms of Chromebooks. Kelly saw the responsible staffing plan and saw how we're trying to get really more lean and careful with our dollars, and so she made it her mission to see how we can do that also with technology. In about 2015, it was very, there was a push to be one-to-one with Chromebooks or with devices. We have now begun to think about if that really does apply to our kindergarten and first grade students. We want them to be holding pencils. We want them to be playing with manipulatives. We don't want them on a screen. And I can tell you from being at an elementary, they're not on a screen all that much. But they do need exposure so that when we do put a Chromebook in front of them, they know how to turn it on, how to log in, and so on. So what we thought was, well, they don't need their own Chromebook for that. We can go back to kind of a shared model. So we were able to save some dollars that way, and Kelly Ram and Mrs. Althouse are working together with principals to make sure that our students have exposure to screens, but they're not using them all that much in K-1. The other thing that Mrs. Ram did is look at whether we need a stylus for every student, and we decided we do not, and what model that we'll use. And so the resolution on the agenda tonight will show several $100,000 in savings in terms of the technology that we're going to buy. And then second on the agenda tonight is your annual interdistrict enrollment resolution. This is a capacity calculation, so to speak, where we look at the square footage of a building and we see how many students will fit in that building, and then we take 85% of that because we need to leave space for students who move in over the summer, transient students, and so on. If there is room in a building, that building is able to be considered for intra-district enrollment applications. If there's not room, then those applications are denied. The applications are currently being accepted until the first business day in May. After that, again, any school with room, those applications will be approved, and any building without it, it will not be approved. So very fair, very consistent, and these numbers just kind of will show parents, if they fill out an application, they'll know if it's going to be approved or denied. Any questions about either of those topics?
I don't have a question, but I just want to say thank you to Kelly Ram and her team for their work in saving the district almost $250,000 this year. That's
and I'm glad you said that, because Kelly did not want me to say her name or thank her, but I saw the work that went into this. I saw the spreadsheets. I saw the questions she asked, and so it was. I agree, Tiffany. I think it's really important that we don't just look at one way where we can be more efficient, that we all take it on, and that was a good move she made. It made Brian Kern very happy when he saw the numbers.
And then just for the inter-district transfer, I'm assuming form is online. I feel like we've talked about this, but just for full transparency.
Yep, and it's good to remind everyone every year, because it is the same process. The form is online. It's on the main web page, and they would fill it out. It's very self-explanatory. And it even has on the form, on the second page of it, where there is openings. Now, sometimes parents still fill it out, and sometimes they write me very compelling letters, and it's all understandable. But it comes down to whether there's room or not.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much. All right.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
What if you have more students who want to transfer than there's available openings? Is it first come, first serve?
It's a great question. Thank you for asking that. In none of the, Scioto is the one that's the closest right now, where we would get to that ceiling. So far, we've not had to address that, because there's not all that many interdistrict applications. We've never gotten to that. If we did, I think we would have to look closer as to why, whether they're siblings, that kind of thing. Dublin used to have about 150 to 200 students attending different schools. Now we're down to a small handful, because we've decided to look at square footage and make room for people who move in. We are going to have a conversation as a board and as a community when redistricting happens, because that will be a lot more complicated, and I think that's when your question might need answered. Thank you, Amy.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve items 9A and 9B. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Rigby. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Valentine. Questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Rigby?
Yes.
Mr. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Messick?
Yes.
And Mrs. Gillis?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Reports from the Department of Operations.
Good evening. We only have 2 items for your approval tonight. The first one deals with the Dare Run roof. As you know, we the board approved an emergency resolution to allow us to go to a request for a proposal instead of a public bid. Cotterman and Company came in with the best price of $1.1 million for the roof, and we have all the backup attached to this, including the the recommendation by Mays Consulting, who's our designer on this. And we also have a signed contract for the board also to sign for this. And with this contract, we will we'll be ordering materials, and we are set to start that roof as soon as school shuts down. And our goal is to have it done before August 1st. The second item on the agenda is this deals with one of our bond projects, and this is to put turf, artificial turf at all 3 high schools at their infield baseball, infield softball, and one multi-use field, practice field at each school. And this will go to Kleininger's, who's a civil engineer who deals with all types of civil engineering, but in particular, they have a turf group. Kleininger's is new to the district, but highly recommended by the City of Dublin. We worked with the city on choosing the vendor for this because there will be lots of stormwater work. We wanted to make sure that we were aligned with them, and fantastic local references, and even from our own council. So we're recommending them for a contract worth $696,000 with a small contingency added on to that, and they will begin that work starting next week. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Stark. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve items 11A and 11B. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby?
Yes.
Mrs. Messick?
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
And Mrs. Gillis?
Yes. Motion passes 5-0. Reports from Human Resources.
Good evening again, members of the board. I'll start tonight with the certified agenda and just highlight a few things that are on. The first item is you'll see an administrative resignation. Mr. Jerry Obney has accepted a position as a principal in another district, and we wish him well. You'll see 3 administrative hires that are being filled internally tonight. And in each case, this is a promotional opportunity for each of those staff members that are listed. Skipping ahead, there's a new hire under item 5, and that's for a speech-language pathologist next school year. The certified resignations that appear next represent some of those positions that I just mentioned that were promotional opportunities for those individuals who are accepting new roles and or their teachers that are resigning at the end of this school year. We did have an ad for retirement. Robin Blau will leave Dublin with 24 years in the district at the end of this school year. The next items are contract renewals, and we do these every April, and they represent where our certified staff members are in their contract cycle with Dublin City Schools. And so you'll see either a 1-year, a 3-year, or a continuing contract recommendation. Those are the 3 options. And we're recommending these tonight to the board. The next several items are related to summer work for our staff, and these items, again, are listed for successful operation of summer school or work in general that will happen in preparation for next school year. There are several leaves of absences on tonight. The first half are those are staff members. They're going to become administrative interns in our district for next school year. And then the rest of them are staff members who've asked to take an unpaid year off next school year. The supplementals that are on tonight's agenda are for athletics and music primarily, and there are just a few items that are either resignations or salary corrections in this section as well. Moving on to our classified agenda, you'll see 8 retirements. I'll try to make this brief, but I always like to mention those folks and just the time they spent in Dublin. Gary Asher will retire as a bus driver with 11 years here. Clifford Brunner will retire as a bus driver. Robin Corridon will, will exit as a bus driver with 25 years in Dublin. And then Victoria Craddock is retiring as a parapro from Chapman Elementary with just 2 years in the district. Leonard Dill will retire from operations with 36 years working in Dublin. Jeffrey Drerup will retire as a bus driver with 10 years. Karen Francis as a parapro with 17 years. Gregory Martin as a bus driver with 17 years. And then Roxanne Werner retiring as a transportation secretary with 12 years in Dublin. So lots of retirements, but that's kind of normal for this time of year as we kind of wrap things up for this school year. You'll see 7 new hires and then 3 unpaid leave of absences. And just like in the certified agenda, there is language and recommendations for classified staff to complete summer work. The final item is in stipends, and there are 4 stipends on tonight's agenda. And the first is just a revision to an item that was previously approved for the board, by the board, for our Safe and Drug-Free Schools program to correct amounts that were paid to staff. The next is for the Corporate Charity Cup that was mentioned earlier. It's a community event that's happening in a few months, and will pay a staff member to be the point of contact. The EL Summer Institute is a stipend that Mr. Andres mentioned. It's paid for through the Title III grant. And again, this is designed to provide professional learning on how best to meet the needs of our students who are English learners along with their regular academics. And then the final item is after schools professional development for teaching and learning coaches to work with our teachers as well. And that completes the HR section for tonight.
Thank you. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve items 13A through 13C. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Valentine. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. De Silva. Questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Messig?
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby?
Yes.
And Mrs. Gillis?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Reports from communications, which we already did. Future agenda items. Okay, we're going to, I'm assuming no note for future agenda items. No. All right. In accordance with the Ohio Revised Code 121.22, the Dublin Board of Education will go into executive session to consider preparing for conducting or reviewing negotiations with public employees. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Rigby. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Valentine. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Rigby?
Yes.
Mr. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Messig?
Yes.
And Mrs. Gillis?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. No action will be taken after executive session, and we will adjourn the meeting.